Growing up, I often felt invisible. My parents were too busy with work to notice me, so I found solace in books, using them to escape the loneliness that stuck with me through my teenage years. I longed for someone to connect with, someone to fill the emptiness I felt. That changed when I met Laura Bennett in middle school. She was like a burst of light in my life, and our friendship quickly turned into romance. We were inseparable through high school, college, and eventually, we got married. From the start, I knew I wanted her by my side forever, even though my parents had their doubts. We had our own separate lives, but the time we spent together always felt special. She was my best friend, and that made marrying her the easiest decision I ever made. We were opposites in a lot of ways. She was outgoing and athletic, while I was more reserved and academic, but those differences didn't matter. We had a connection that kept us close. We shared everything, and while I wasn't sure if I believed in soulmates, I thought if they existed, she was mine. When I asked her father, Jorge, for permission to marry her, he made me prove my love for her. I was committed, through good times and bad. But I never expected the worst would come just a few years later. Even then, I still wanted her happiness, even if it meant losing mine. Recently, Laura had started pulling away. She'd come home late, barely even looking at me, and her smile was gone. It's soul-crushing when the person you love no longer loves you back. One night, she came into the dining room quietly, looking distant. "Hey, Lori," I greeted her, trying to sound normal. "Hey, Ethan," she replied flatly. "Everything okay?" "Not really," she said, sitting down. "I need to tell you something." I knew what was coming. I had rehearsed this moment, knowing I had to let her go. "Lori, I love you," I said. "I don't want to argue or accuse. I just want us to decide what's best for both of us." She looked at me nervously. "Of course, Ethan. What's going on?" "I can see you're not happy with me anymore," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tears welled up in her eyes, and in a strange way, it was comforting to know she still felt something. "I don't want to get into details," I continued, "but if you can admit you're unhappy too, that would mean a lot." She whispered, "Yes, Ethan. I know. I'm not happy. I want a divorce." I didn't say anything at first. I just nodded, even though the words hit me hard. Laura's father, Jorge, was a man I deeply respected. He had raised 8 kids in a tough neighborhood, and I admired him for it. I owed him an explanation. So I went to his house, sat with him on the porch, and told him the truth. "Mijo, why are you here?" he asked, already sensing something was wrong. "I'm leaving Laura," I said. "I've loved her since the day I met her, and I promised I'd always put her first. That's what I'm doing now, even though it means letting her go." As expected, he was furious. He switched between English and Spanish, demanding answers I couldn't give. "Some things need to stay between me and her," I explained. "But our marriage isn't working, and this is what's best for both of us." Eventually, he calmed down and let me finish. Though he was upset, he respected my honesty and allowed me to leave without making a scene. Laura didn't argue or cry. A small part of me wished she would have asked me to stay, but she didn't. The only time she reacted was when I mentioned her father. "I talked to your dad today," I told her. "I've drawn up the paperwork for the divorce and the division of our assets, especially the house. Please review them and let me know by next week." "Okay, Ethan," she said coldly. "I'll take a look." I know people will wonder why I didn't go after her lover or try to fight for her. The truth is, I didn't have the energy. I'm not built for revenge. The last time I got into a fight was in high school, when someone made Laura cry. I almost got expelled, but Jorge helped keep me out of trouble. And beyond that, my mental health was shot. I was losing sleep, barely functioning at work, and nearly got fired. My mom had died of cancer when I was in college, and my dad had become a heavy drinker and disappeared to Florida, cutting off all contact. I needed a fresh start, and for that, Laura had to agree to the divorce. I was only 25 and had my whole life ahead of me. Revenge wasn't on my mind. Survival was. 2 weeks later, we met at the attorney's office. She gave up the house, and we agreed to sell it. We split our accounts. She kept the new car, and I took my old truck. Everything was settled except for the 90-day waiting period. As we left, she asked, "Where are you going to live?" "I rented a small apartment near the office," I lied. I'll stay there until I figure things out. Good, she said, without much feeling. I guess I'll see you at the house closing. Yeah, see you then, Lori. In reality, I had no intention of staying. My truck was packed, and as soon as I got home, I left my wedding ring on the kitchen table with a note, "Goodbye. I will always love you. Be happy." Before leaving town, I stopped by to say goodbye to Jorge. He was heartbroken. "Mijo, you and Laura belong together. Can't there be forgiveness?" he asked. "I've forgiven her," I said. "I still love her, but I need peace." Carmen Bennett hugged me at the door, whispering, "God bless you, Mijo. We'll miss you." I left quickly before I could break down. When your spouse is unhappy, you want to know why. But in my case, I never really got an answer. Little things came up, like me leaving the toilet seat up, but we hadn't even been arguing. I thought she was stressed from work, but she always said she'd be fine. In an attempt to fix things, I took on more around the house, cooking, dishes, laundry, hoping Laura would notice. After a few weeks, I even cleaned the bathroom, which I hated doing. If I hadn't cleaned it, I might not have discovered the pregnancy test in the trash. Digging deeper, I found it was positive and saw her birth control pills untouched. That's when I realized my wife was pregnant by another man. But who? It didn't take long to figure out. I called Laura, but her number was forwarded to the front desk. She had already left work. Her car was still in the lot, so I drove to her office. 20 minutes later, any hope that something innocent had happened vanished when her boss, Daniel Hayes, pulled up next to her car. They kissed openly. The smile that used to be mine now belonged to someone else. That night, I got home before she did, hiding my emotions. She barely looked my way. In just a couple of hours, I knew my marriage was over. The next day, I packed up and hit the road, driving aimlessly through Nebraska, Colorado, and Utah. I wasn't sure if my truck could handle the mountains, but after 4 days, I made it to Las Vegas. I checked into a hotel, slept for 18 hours, and started filling out housing applications. Less than a week ago, I was a newly divorced 25-year-old with no family. Now, I was starting law school, trying to rebuild my life. I wish I could say I had new adventures after college, but that wasn't the case. I had no experience dating. Ethan and Laura had always been a pair. I had no clue how to start over. Throughout law school, I didn't go on a single date or make close friends. Instead, I buried myself in my studies, aiming for top grades. I earned my Juris Doctor and MBA, and after we split, I took the LSAT, applied to law schools, and got a full scholarship to Las Vegas. I didn't know much about the city, only that it was far from home. Once a month, I wrote to Jorge and Carmen Bennett about my studies. It was more out of habit than anything, a routine from when I used to keep in touch with my parents. Occasionally, I'd get emails back from them, mostly updates on their other kids. They never mentioned Laura. For the first few months, they hinted at forgiveness or reconciliation, but those hints eventually stopped. I never doubted Laura would keep her baby, though I wondered if she'd tell her parents before it became obvious. And would Daniel Hayes leave his wife for her? I never had the courage to ask, but I knew a child from a black man wouldn't look like me. One day, I sent flowers, balloons, and a gift basket to the Hayes family, congratulating them on the baby. I sent a duplicate to Laura's office, addressed to the president of her company. I didn't stoop to spreading rumors. I just wanted to close the chapter. I was genuinely happy for her, knowing she was fulfilling her dream of a big family, even though it hurt me. I imagined disaster for Daniel Hayes, though that was wishful thinking. This small, cowardly act gave me some closure, though the pain remained. My social life took a major hit after the divorce. I didn't have any close friends until I met a colleague 20 years older at the small law firm I joined. I had a knack for real estate law, particularly contracts and numbers. Samuel Harris, the senior partner, saw potential in me. He became my mentor, coaching me not just professionally but in life. "Ethan, people trust you to solve their problems," he said. "They hand you the keys to their dreams, and you have to deliver. You've got a gift." 90 days into my career, he gave me my first evaluation. "You're dedicated and meticulous, Ethan, but as a person, you're completely out of touch. Are you 30 or 90? Let's go for a walk." That's how our weekly Ethan Project meetings began. Harris was brilliant. He'd ask questions, let me talk, and share stories. I opened up about my life, my parents, law school, and Laura. He listened, helped me grow, and over time, I started going to the gym, learning to cook, and making better investments. Thanks to him, I began building a life for myself. Without his guidance, I might have just settled for a typical middle-class existence. With Harris's guidance, I grew into a confident, successful businessman. He never took credit, always saying, "Watching you succeed is thanks enough." After helping me with my career, he turned his attention to my personal life. One day, he asked, "Ethan, what are you getting your parents for their anniversary?" I was confused since my parents had passed, but then he clarified. "Next month, Jorge and Carmen Bennett will be married for 50 years. Only a jackass wouldn't mark that event." He was right. The Bennett had been like family to me. For their 50th anniversary, I gave them a special gift: first-class airfare, a 5-star hotel, a limo, fine dining, and VIP show tickets in Las Vegas. I sent it with a note: "Happy anniversary. Use these as you wish. Love, Ethan." The next day, Mrs. Bennett called. "Oh, Mijo, this is too much," she exclaimed. I reassured her, saying, "You both deserve this, and I'm honored to give it to you." Then Jorge came on the line, expressing his own reluctance to accept the gift, worrying about the cost. "Papa," I interrupted gently, "this doesn't even come close to repaying all the kindness you've shown me." After a pause, he finally agreed. "See, Mijo, we accept." For the first time in years, I felt a deep sense of peace. Harris caught me reflecting in my office doorway, grinning. "Damn ungrateful kids," he teased. "Shut up, old man," I shot back, smiling. I hadn't planned to spend much time with the Bennett during their vacation, figuring they'd have plenty to do, but Mrs. Bennett called as soon as they arrived, eager to see me. "When are you coming to see us, Mijo?" she asked. I tried to stall, mentioning their flight, but she insisted. Realizing I'd need to shuffle my work schedule, I was surprised when Harris intervened. "Ethan, I've cleared your calendar for a week. Spend time with your parents, or you're fired," he commanded, leaving no room for argument. The Bennett visited my office, and Harris, rarely one for sentiment, gave them a personal tour, introducing them as my parents. He spent an hour praising my work, treating them like royalty. Mrs. Bennett beamed, patting my hand each time someone complimented me. "We're so proud of you, Mijo," she said, her eyes glowing with pride. The rest of the week unfolded like a dream. Harris's influence was evident everywhere. The limo, resort, restaurants, and shows I'd arranged all treated us like VIPs, with owners and directors personally welcoming us. "I've never received this level of service before," I admitted to the Bennett. Carmen smiled. "It's wonderful that you have so many friends who want to show us how special you are. We've always been proud of you, Ethan." Jorge then spoke with a seriousness that made my heart swell. "You've been a constant in our lives since you were a boy, and watching you grow into a fine man has been an honor. We love you and are proud of you." His hug nearly cracked a rib, and Carmen quickly joined in, creating a family moment I had longed for. Their visit flew by, and though I was sad to see them go, I promised to visit soon. Harris had known exactly what I needed. I returned to work recharged, and when I pitched him a new project, he smiled and gave me the go-ahead. It wasn't a huge moneymaker, but it was likely the most important project I'd ever take on. In just 6 weeks, I managed to tie up nearly all the loose ends, finalizing title deeds, securing a buyer with full financing, and making a few key phone calls. With everything in place, I booked my first flight back to my hometown in nearly 10 years. The memories flooded back as I prepared to step foot in a place I hadn't called home in a decade. At the airport, while waiting for my flight, I overheard 2 young women working at a coffee kiosk. Claire and Sophie were talking about their broken appliances and how their landlord refused to fix anything. When Claire handed me my coffee, I saw the frustration in her face. On a whim, I decided to help. I pulled out my business card, scribbled some instructions on the back, and handed it to her. "I overheard your conversation," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "I think I can help you. Call the number on the back and ask for Josh. Tell him Ethan sent you, and that you need Tyler's help. He'll take care of it. And don't worry about the cost." Claire's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Absolutely," I replied. "A few calls and some paperwork could get you out of a bad situation. Just make sure to follow up with Josh." Before boarding, I shot a quick email to Josh, my reliable paralegal, so he wouldn't be blindsided by the call. Harris had always emphasized that real estate wasn't a zero-sum game. Sometimes, helping others created goodwill that came back to you in unexpected ways. It wasn't about the money. It was about doing what was right. We did pro bono work from time to time, and this was no different. The flight to Omaha was short, but filled with a mix of emotions. I rented a car, grabbed my luggage, and drove through the city. Not much had changed, but it no longer felt like home. I passed through familiar streets, neighborhoods that seemed more run-down than I remembered, especially around the Bennett old house. Most of the homes were in disrepair, a stark contrast to their place, which still stood proud amid the decay. The neighborhood had clearly been neglected, but their home remained a symbol of resilience. My destination was different this time. A new condominium complex that stood out from the surrounding area. It was modern, with condos above retail spaces, restaurants, a theater, and a grocery store. The design was sleek, unlike anything in that part of town, and I felt a strange sense of detachment as I entered the building. The apartment I had rented was stunning, brand new, with 2 bedrooms, an open living area, a den, and a large balcony that overlooked a park. The master suite had a spa-like feel, complete with a jetted tub and a spacious tiled shower. Everything was top of the line, from the appliances to the fixtures. It was a space I had designed to feel like a home, but for now, it was just another stop on my journey. The Bennett met me for dinner that night at one of the restaurants below. They arrived right on time, dressed for a night out, and despite their age, they still had that youthful energy. At 67, Jorge and Carmen had been married for 50 years, but their years of hard work were beginning to show. Yet, their spirits remained strong. We had a wonderful dinner, full of laughter and nostalgia. It felt like old times, but I could tell there was something weighing on them. During our time in Las Vegas, they had confided in me about their plans to retire. They were ready to slow down, but they were worried. Worried about money, their neighborhood, and what the future held. Their area had become dangerous, with crime and abandoned houses all around them. I knew they needed a change, and I had a plan to help. As Harris had reminded me, this is what children do for their parents. After dinner, I invited them back to the condo. As we stepped into the elevator, they looked around in awe. "I didn't know this was a hotel, Mijo. These rooms must be expensive," Mrs. Bennett remarked, her voice full of surprise. I smiled. "Yeah, we need to talk about that." When I opened the door to the apartment, their eyes widened in amazement. The space was everything they dreamed of, and I had made sure of it. Before they arrived, I had reached out to their 7 children, asking each of them to describe their parents' ideal home. I took their preferences and made it a reality. Their attention soon turned to the champagne bottle on the counter. "Are we celebrating something?" Carmen asked, curious. "Yes, I hope so," I said, popping the cork. "To your retirement and to your new home." They were speechless, clearly overwhelmed. "Oh my goodness, Ethan, this is too much. We can't accept something like this," Jorge said, shaking his head in disbelief. "It's not a gift," I reassured them. "You'll have more than enough to buy it yourselves." I guided them to the couch and explained the plan. We were forming a partnership, the Bennett Investment Group. First, we'd close on 19 properties near their house, package them with their current home, and sell the entire lot to a developer who was planning a hotel and retail space next to the new arena. The sale would go through in 90 days, and I showed them the projected sale price. They couldn't believe the numbers. "This apartment is rented for the next 3 months, with an option to buy," I continued, handing them the details. "And half the remaining profits will fund a lifetime annuity for you both. You'll have monthly dividends to cover your expenses. You won't be rich, but you'll never have to work again." Jorge sat there, stunned. "Ethan, how did you pull this off?" I explained that buying the properties near theirs had been a challenge, but Harris had found a buyer through his connections. A new casino was being built across the river in Iowa, so we were able to negotiate a much higher price. The zoning change would be handled by our buyer's contacts in the city council. Everything was falling into place. Carmen wiped away tears, smiling through them. "It's a miracle," she said softly. Jorge, always the strong one, simply nodded, still in disbelief. More than we could have ever imagined. As we toasted to their future, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. I hadn't heard from Laura in a decade, and her family never mentioned her. In many ways, she had faded from my mind. But as I looked around at the life I had built, I realized that part of me had been holding on to the past without even knowing it. That all changed when I saw her again. It was completely by chance. I had gone to the new mall to pick up a few things for an upcoming trip, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. As I browsed the shelves in one of my favorite stores, a voice from behind startled me. "You have great taste," the voice said. I turned around, and there she was, Laura, standing right in front of me. Her tone was a mix of surprise and nostalgia, just like the flood of emotions that hit me in that moment. Here's a more concise version of Part 5, keeping the core elements intact while reducing the overall length. I turned and saw Laura standing there, looking much like I remembered. Older, a little heavier, and with a smile that had lost its radiance. She was simply a more mature version of the woman I once married. "Hi, Laura," I greeted her, unsure of what to expect. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice curious. "Just shopping. And you?" I replied, keeping the conversation casual. "Oh, I work here now," she explained. "I meant, why are you in town?" "Finishing some business, visiting old friends," I said, not offering much. "Was I on your list of friends to visit?" she asked, half joking but with a hint of hope. "Honestly, no," I admitted. "Oh, okay. Nice to see you, Ethan," she said, her disappointment clear. "You too, Laura," I replied, thinking that would be the end of it. I didn't expect to see her again, but as I was leaving, I noticed her at the register. After her transaction, she approached me once more. "Ethan, how long will you be in town?" she asked, this time more hesitant. "Maybe a few days," I answered, unsure where this was headed. "Could we get together and talk?" she asked, handing me her card. "I'll think about it," I said, taking the card but not committing to anything. I walked away, convinced I had moved on. Yet, 2 nights later, I found myself sitting in a booth at one of our old hangouts. It felt different now. When she arrived, she was dressed up in a little black dress, makeup carefully done. She looked good, but I wasn't in the mood to compliment her. I didn't stand when she slid into the booth across from me. We sat in awkward silence before she spoke. "You lied to me," she said, her tone accusatory. "And you lied to me first," I shot back, both of us knowing what we meant. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she confessed. "I hoped we'd talk." "What would have been the point?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "I wasn't happy when you left," she said softly. "Well, you didn't give me a choice," I replied bluntly. "I don't feel guilty about your unhappiness." She seemed surprised by my bluntness, but continued. "I never stopped loving you, even after everything." I sighed, sensing she wanted to reopen old wounds. "Laura, the only good thing about our divorce is that you didn't lie to me. Probably because I didn't give you a chance. But I won't sit here if you start lying now. What do you want? Why are we here? Nothing will change what happened." "But you never fought for me," she said, her voice quiet. "You just gave up. Why didn't you try? I thought you loved me." I shook my head. "From my view, you gave up on me. I just put it in writing. That was a mistake, Ethan. I'm sorry." "Okay," she said, her eyes pleading. I groaned inwardly. Years apart had given me clarity, but it seemed Laura hadn't let go of the past. "Nonsense," I shot back. "Just because things didn't go how you wanted doesn't mean you get to rewrite history. Don't insult my intelligence." "I did love you, Ethan. I still love you," she insisted. "You really believe that?" I asked. "It's true," she said firmly. "All right, let's test that. Was it you or Daniel Hayes who decided I should be deprived of sex with my loving wife?" I asked, leaning forward. She hesitated, a flicker of shame crossing her face. "It was him," she admitted. "So, your love for me let you sleep with another man and follow his rules, knowing it would hurt me?" I asked, bitterness creeping into my voice. "Ethan, she started. but I interrupted. How long before you stopped taking birth control? I demanded. What? I don't know, she stammered. Don't lie, I said coldly. You didn't accidentally get pregnant. You wanted him to father your child. When were you going to tell me? Or were you going to pretend it was mine? She didn't answer, avoiding my gaze. Why aren't you with him now? Where is he? I pressed. He didn't want me, she whispered. His wife found out, and so did his boss. His wife divorced him, and he resigned. He left me. I had to quit too. It was too embarrassing, and I'm supposed to feel bad for you? Why? I asked, my tone icy. I don't know, Ethan, she said, her voice breaking. I made a mistake. I know I was wrong. Can't you forgive me? I still love you. I've been alone ever since you left. My parents barely speak to me. My siblings avoid me, and I have no one. Laura, I said firmly, I forgave you a long time ago, but that doesn't mean we can go back. Her face fell as the reality of my words sank in. You have your child, I continued. He can keep you company. That's cruel, Ethan, she said, her voice wounded. No more cruel than the lies you've been telling yourself, I replied, standing up to leave. I'm not lying, Ethan, she said desperately. You're only lying to yourself, I said quietly before walking out, knowing there was nothing more to say. I want another chance. I've dreamed of it all these years, Laura pleaded, her voice breaking. It's never going to happen, I said, leaving no room for debate. Why not, Ethan? I know you still love me. You said you always would. She reminded me, desperation evident. I have always loved you, but that's not enough, I admitted, the truth heavy between us. Why isn't it enough? She asked, her voice trembling. There are 2 reasons, I began. First, I'm not the same person who married you. I've changed, and you don't know who I am now. I certainly don't know you either, if I ever really did. You do know me, Ethan. I'm still the same woman you loved. I haven't changed, she insisted, her eyes pleading. So what's the second reason? I met her gaze, realizing how much had been left unsaid. All right, here's the second reason, and then I have a question for you. You wanted someone else, and I let you go without a fight because I loved you. Since then, I've gone to law school, passed the bar, and built a life for myself. But despite all that, I haven't been with another woman since our last time together. Her face paled, confusion replacing the hope in her eyes. So tell me, Laura, I continued, leaning forward, how many men have you been with while you were supposedly pining for me? She averted her eyes, silent, unable to answer. Look at me, I said coldly. Answer the question. Still, she said nothing, her silence giving me the answer I needed. That's what I thought, I said, feeling a strange sense of closure. You see, back then, I didn't realize the woman I loved was a liar and a cheat. I don't know who you really are, but I know you're not someone I can ever trust again. So why would I want to let you back into my life? Give me one reason, just one, that isn't only for your benefit. She started crying softly, unable to speak. I stood up, feeling the conversation had run its course. That's what I thought, I said. Goodbye, Laura. 3 months later, I returned to Omaha for business. Things felt different this time. The deals had gone smoothly, and Jorge and Carmen were happy in their new home. Seeing them so content warmed my heart and reminded me why I had put so much effort into helping them. At the airport, I spotted Claire and Sophie working at their kiosk. The 2 women I had helped months ago were all smiles, laughing as they worked. When Claire saw me, her face lit up, and she waved me over. Mr. O'Connor, she called out. Yes, can I help you? I replied, turning to her. For a moment, I didn't recognize them, but then it clicked. Oh, right. How did everything work out? I asked, remembering our last encounter. Everything worked out perfectly, Claire said, her curly hair bouncing as she spoke. We wanted to thank you, but we didn't know how. It's Ethan, and there's no need to thank me, I said, smiling. I'm just glad things worked out for you both. Claire, with her bright smile, did most of the talking while Sophie, her quieter cousin, stood beside her, nodding. They both seemed happy, their lives clearly improved since the last time we met. As my flight was announced, I started to gather my things. It was nice seeing you both again, I said, preparing to leave. Just before I could step away, Claire quickly approached and handed me a napkin with her phone number scribbled on it. We'd like to thank you properly. Will you call when you get back? She asked, her tone hopeful. Caught off guard, I nodded. Sure, no problem, I said, tucking the napkin into my pocket before heading to board my flight. Months later, I arranged an unusual gathering for the Bennett family. It wasn't a holiday like Thanksgiving or Christmas. This was something different. I had asked everyone to come together in September, a time when we usually didn't have family events. The Bennett new apartment was cozy, but large enough for everyone. They looked at me, curious, waiting for me to explain why I'd brought them together. I took a deep breath, knowing this wouldn't be easy. I asked everyone to come here today because there's something important I need to say, I began. I wanted to say this once and make sure everyone heard it at the same time. I paused, collecting my thoughts. Being treated like a full member of this family has been one of the greatest joys of my life. Jorge and Carmen, your love and support have meant everything to me. But I need to talk about Laura. At the mention of her name, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Laura was part of this family too. She made mistakes I paid for, but she didn't betray any of you. A few months ago, I spoke to her for the first time in 10 years. It was a difficult conversation, and I said things to her that were hard to hear. But what hurt me most was what she told me about all of you. I looked around the room, seeing their shocked expressions. So, with all due respect, I'm asking you to stop treating her like an outsider. Until she's welcomed back into this family, I want nothing to do with any of you. Jorge and Carmen looked heartbroken, but I held firm. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I love you both, but until this situation with Laura is resolved, I won't be in contact with you. With that, I left, walking away from the only family I had left. The next year was a whirlwind. Work at the office was relentless, with 14-hour days and nonstop deals. After nearly 8 weeks of this breakneck pace, Harris finally snapped. That's it, he announced one evening in the conference room. Everyone, get out of here and don't come back for a week. I'll pay you just so I don't have to see you. On the first day of my mandatory break, I cleaned my apartment from top to bottom. It had been months since I'd given it any attention, and it showed. Piles of papers, clothes, and takeout containers littered every corner. While sorting through my laundry, I came across the napkin with Claire's phone number on it. By the third day, my apartment was spotless, and my closet was organized. Yet the napkin still sat on my dining table, like a challenge waiting to be faced. After staring at it for a while, I finally decided to make the call. I felt awkward dialing the number, my nerves catching me off guard. When she answered, I stumbled over my words. Hello? Claire's voice came through the phone, bright and curious. Hi, is this Claire? I asked, feeling unexpectedly nervous. This is her, she replied. Oh, hi, Claire. This is Ethan Carter. We met at the airport. You gave me your number, I reminded Claire, hoping she remembered. Yes, I remember you, Ethan, she said warmly, her tone familiar. Well, I know it's short notice, but would you and Sophie like to come over for dinner tonight? I thought I'd cook for you both and hear how things went with your apartment. We got kicked out of the office for a week, and I'm bored, I added, trying to sound casual but feeling a bit embarrassed by my rambling. She giggled, making me feel even more self-conscious. Ethan, we'd love to have dinner at your place tonight, Claire replied enthusiastically. Fantastic. Can I get your address? I asked, realizing I hadn't given her the details yet. After providing my address, I felt both flustered and excited about the evening ahead. When they arrived later, I was more comfortable than I expected. Talking with Claire and Sophie in person felt easy. Sophie, who was usually quiet, made eye contact and smiled, which put me at ease. This is a great apartment, Ethan. Do you host parties here often? Claire asked, her eyes taking in the space with appreciation. The apartment was impressive, largely because it was part of a project Harris and I had been working on. I had jumped at the chance to buy a 3-bedroom penthouse with a stunning view of the Strip, but I didn't mention that I owned the building. Actually, you're the first visitors I've had, besides my boss, I admitted. Really? No girlfriend? Claire asked, clearly surprised. Nope. I haven't even been on a date since my divorce 10 years ago, I said casually as I focused on preparing dinner. Both Claire and Sophie stared at me in shock. What? Did I say something wrong? I asked, puzzled by their reactions. You haven't been on a date in 10 years, Ethan? Claire repeated, astonished. No, I've been busy with work and school. Is that weird? I asked, genuinely curious. Yes, Claire exclaimed, and even Sophie nodded in agreement. Well, I guess it is kind of weird, I shrugged, trying to downplay it. Jesus, Ethan, I can't believe it, Claire said, shaking her head. It's true, I said. Anyway, dinner's ready. Let's eat. I quickly steered the conversation back to the meal, feeling a bit self-conscious. Dinner was fun, filled with laughter. I learned that Claire was in her final year studying hospitality management, and Sophie was studying English with a focus on creative writing. Both were 22 and had been living together since they were 18 after Sophie's parents passed away. Claire mentioned that Sophie liked me and would eventually open up more. There was an energy in the air, a sort of electric undercurrent, and I wondered if they were flirting with me. I enjoyed the attention, even if it was just in my head. At the end of the evening, both girls gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek before leaving, with Claire suggesting we meet again soon. Jokingly, I said I was free the rest of the week. To my surprise, they showed up the next day with a picnic basket. We had lunch on the balcony, enjoying the day until it got too hot, and then they left for work. I realized they were taking my invitation seriously. The next evening, they returned with pizza, popcorn, and a movie. They took over the couch while I relaxed in my favorite chair. It was easy, comfortable, almost like we had fallen into a routine without realizing it. The day after that, Claire asked if they could use the pool. I made sure they had access to both the pool and the gym, along with lockers. Sometimes, it pays to be in charge. They had a surprise for me, too. When they came out in their bikinis, I realized I should probably step up my workout routine. It was hard not to notice how attractive they both were, but I tried to stay focused on being a good host. After that week, we fell into a rhythm. I worked during the day, and they'd visit a few evenings a week for dinner, movies, or just to hang out. On weekends, we'd find things to do together. They also started using the gym regularly, even when I wasn't around. Harris found it amusing and never missed an opportunity to tease me. If I didn't know you better, I'd think you were dating two women at once, he'd say with a smirk. Give me a break, man. We're just friends. And keep your fantasies to yourself, I'd reply, trying to brush it off. About 4 months into our friendship, I noticed something was off. During a quiet Friday night dinner at my place, the girls seemed unusually reserved. As the meal wrapped up, the tension became impossible to ignore. Is something wrong? I asked, sensing that something was bothering them. Sophie hesitated before speaking. Claire wants to ask you something, but we're not sure how to phrase it. Claire, you can ask me anything, I said, trying to ease the tension. I have no filter with you two. Just ask, and I promise not to be offended. Claire took a deep breath before speaking. Why haven't you ever made a move on us? Don't you find us attractive? I was caught off guard and took a moment to collect myself. You're both stunningly beautiful, but I haven't made a move for 2 reasons. First, I don't want to ruin our friendship or make you think I'm some old guy hanging around for kicks. Second, I'm not sure I even know how to make a move anymore. I haven't had the chance. Claire and Sophie exchanged a glance before Claire continued. Ethan, we really enjoy spending time with you, and we both like you a lot. I like spending time with you too, I replied. But what are you saying? Sophie shifted uncomfortably before Claire spoke again. Sophie and I are looking for someone special, and we want you to understand what that means. You're both beautiful, and I'm sure you'll each find someone special without any problems, I said, feeling slightly confused. Claire took a deep breath. Ethan, we don't want to find 2 special people. We want one. And we think that person might be, well, you. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. Before I could respond, Claire added, we want you to understand what we're asking. Sophie would like you to read some of her work tonight. We think reading Sophie's stories will help you understand what we're looking for. Then we can talk tomorrow about what it means for all of us. Can you do that? Claire asked. I think I can. You just want me to read her stories? I confirmed. Yes, Ethan. Then we'll talk, Claire replied. I agreed, but as I sat down to read Sophie's stories later that evening, I couldn't help but reflect on how much my life had changed in the past few years. I had strong beliefs about right and wrong, and I always treated the people I cared about with kindness and respect. However, I had also become tough when necessary, especially in business. Harris once called it my Jekyll and Hyde quality, willing to give people a head start but ruthless if crossed. I wasn't always like that. Laura's betrayal had shaped me, making me fiercely loyal to those I trusted and merciless to those who hurt me. After the divorce, I threw myself into work and studies, trying to heal. For years, romance wasn't even on my radar. The pain had consumed me, and anything that reminded me of Laura was unbearable. I coped by focusing on my career, but in doing so, I missed out on so much of life. I had never asked a girl out, never had a fling, and felt completely inexperienced. My divorce left me insecure about relationships, and the fear of rejection was always present. As I began reading Sophie's stories, I was captivated by the beauty of her writing. Her words were full of vivid imagery, deep emotions, and well-drawn characters. Through her stories, I gained insight into who Sophie was, her hopes, fears, and her soul. By the time I finished, I knew more about her than I expected. The next day, Claire and Sophie arrived at noon, and I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. After we settled in with drinks and snacks, Claire got straight to the point. Ethan, Sophie and I aren't involved with each other sexually, she said, surprising me. Okay. I hadn't thought about it, I admitted, somewhat relieved but unsure of where this was going. We've always looked out for each other. We're not just cousins, we're best friends, Claire explained. When we started dating, we'd talk about what we liked in guys and what we wanted in relationships. I've always been drawn to sweet, caring men, while Sophie is attracted to more assertive, alpha types. The guys she dated were great in bed, but often treated her poorly. I didn't want her to get hurt. Claire and Sophie held hands, clearly sharing a deep bond. Then Claire continued, her voice softening. Then our worst fears came true. One of Sophie's boyfriends became too aggressive, and a few weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. The pregnancy didn't go well, and it had to be terminated for her health. Complications arose, and Sophie can't have children. I glanced at Sophie, who was visibly emotional, tears welling in her eyes. We were only 19, and that dream of having children together ended before it could start. But we didn't want to let go of our dream. We decided that I would have children, and Sophie would help me raise them. We would share my children as co-mothers. It was one of the most selfless and beautiful things I had ever heard, and I was moved by Claire's kindness and Sophie's strength. But then we had another problem, Claire continued. The men I liked were too weak for Sophie, and the ones she liked were too arrogant for me. We couldn't find someone who fit both of us. Sophie finally spoke, her voice soft and vulnerable. Then we met you. My heart raced as Claire picked up where Sophie left off. You helped us without expecting anything in return. You've been kind and respectful, and as we've gotten to know you, we realized you might be the person we were looking for. So we decided to be honest with you, even if it meant risking our friendship. I was stunned. I hadn't expected this at all, and it took me a moment to process what they were offering. They were asking me to share a life with both of them, something I had never considered. This is a lot to take in, I finally said. I need time to think. Can we talk more about this over the weekend? Of course, Ethan. We understand, Claire said, and they left soon after. Though I already knew my answer deep down, I wanted to give them a thoughtful response. They had shared something deeply personal, and I felt the need to respond in kind. Later that afternoon, I ran some errands, then returned to my apartment and sent a text to Sophie before calling Claire. Hello? Claire answered. Hi, Claire. It's Ethan. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. In the background, I heard Sophie's phone ringing, followed by a surprised sigh. Ethan, I'd love to have dinner tonight, Claire replied warmly. Great. I'll pick you up at 7 o'clock, I said, feeling a sense of anticipation. After I hung up, I waited for Sophie's response to my text. The message I had sent her was riskier. Be at my place at 6:15. Don't be late. You'll be staying the night. Her reply came quickly. Perfect. When I arrived to pick up Claire, I was momentarily speechless. She looked stunning in a little black dress. I handed her a bouquet of white lilies, feeling a bit nervous. Wow, you look amazing, I said, genuinely impressed. Thank you, Ethan. The flowers are beautiful, and so is the compliment, she responded with a smile. Our evening was romantic. We shared wine and sushi at one of her favorite restaurants, and then went to a nightclub for drinks. We talked about our dreams, future plans, kids, and family. By the end of the night, we had bonded deeply. As we walked through a park, holding hands, I couldn't shake a lingering worry. What's bothering you, Ethan? Claire asked, sensing my unease. Why me, Claire? I'm over 10 years older than you, divorced, and every eye was on you tonight. You could have anyone. Why me? Ethan, you'll figure it out soon. But for tonight, can you accept that you're the one? There's no one else for me, she reassured me, her voice steady and calm. Yes, I can live with that. Thank you for a wonderful evening, Claire, I said, feeling more at ease. No, Ethan, thank you, she replied, squeezing my hand gently. On Easter Sunday, I found myself sitting in my old church, feeling strangely out of place. I had converted to Catholicism to marry Laura and was a faithful parishioner during our marriage, but it felt foreign being there again after so many years. I had been sitting alone for about 15 minutes when someone quietly sat down next to me. This seems like a good place for confession. Forgive me, Ethan, for I have sinned, Laura said, breaking the silence. I turned to face her, feeling a mixture of surprise and calm. Laura, I forgave you a long time ago. I know, Ethan, but you forgave me when I didn't deserve it. I wasn't even sorry back then. Now I understand the pain I caused you. I wish I could take it all back. I always thought you deserved someone better, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be the woman you needed. Thank you for giving me my family back. My dad told me it was because of you. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate your apology. You're always welcome. Mass went on, and Easter brunch was pleasant enough, but as the day progressed, I realized there was no longer a place for me in the Bennett family. It became clear that it was time to let go and move forward. When it was time to say goodbye, the farewells were tearful. Carmen Bennett hugged me at the door, her understanding deeper than words. She placed her hand on my cheek, closed her eyes for a moment, and whispered, God bless you, Mijo. I will miss you. My personal life was anything but conventional. For months, Claire, Sophie, and I had settled into an unusual but comfortable routine. We spent most of our time together, and it felt like we were a close-knit trio. If they had lived with me full-time, we might have only spent a few more hours together each week. I was happy with Claire, though our relationship hadn't progressed beyond kissing. She believed we'd know when the right time came, and I agreed. The oddest part was that Claire had no problem teasing me and then sending me to Sophie for comfort. Sophie, in turn, blossomed under this arrangement. Claire once told me that Sophie had thought I was perfect from the start. Sophie needed guidance and security, which I gradually took over from Claire. The turning point came when I gave them flowers. It hadn't seemed like a big deal at the time. Giving Claire flowers felt natural, romantic, but Sophie's flowers were more of a thank you, delivered separately because of the circumstances. When Sophie walked in with the biggest smile, holding her flowers, I knew I'd done the right thing. That night, something shifted between us. Over the next few months, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to win Sophie over. But that first night, instinct took over. As our bond grew, so did my understanding of her needs and desires. In time, I became the person she leaned on for support. As I left Omaha for the last time, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had survived Laura's betrayal, rebuilt my life, and built a career. Yet, I realized something was still missing: true happiness. On my way home, I made a stop, bought 2 things, and quickly returned. When I got back, Claire and Sophie were thrilled to see me, and we enjoyed a light, fun dinner together. As we sat down afterward, I hoped to make our lives even better. While they cleaned up in the kitchen, working together seamlessly, I observed them with affection. I think I know why we haven't been intimate, I said, breaking the silence. Sophie turned to look at me, while Claire kept her eyes on the sink. When we make love for the first time, It won't just be for pleasure. It'll be to create life, to share something meaningful. That's why we'll be together. But there's an even more important reason. You'll be giving Sophie and me something we can't get on our own, a child. Sophie smiled through her tears, as if she had been waiting for me to realize this. I think you've waited long enough, I said, kneeling down and pulling out a box. Sophie started to jump with excitement as I opened it, while Claire turned slowly, tears in her eyes. Claire, will you marry me? Yes, Ethan, I will. I'll love you forever and give you everything I have, she said, her voice full of emotion. Claire and Sophie hugged first, their closeness undeniable. I slipped the ring onto Claire's finger as Sophie admired it. That's a beautiful ring, Ethan, Sophie said, her eyes shining. You're not left out, Sophie. You're a vital part of our lives. I pulled out a second box, revealing an ankle bracelet with a diamond set in a Celtic knot, adorned with 3 birthstones, ruby, sapphire, and amethyst. Sophie, we love you and need you. Please don't ever leave us. Claire cried softly, but Sophie remained calm as I fastened the bracelet around her ankle. I'm home, Ethan. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. We were married 3 months later in a small, intimate ceremony. Sophie stood beside Claire, and Harris was by my side. 6 months later, Aiden Hayes O'Connor was born. Twins Sophia Marie and Stephen Daniel followed soon after, and later, baby Olivia Rose. The boys looked like me. Sophia was a miniature version of Claire, and Olivia was a clone of Sophie. Their bond was instant, unbreakable. Were Claire and I jealous that Olivia seemed to treat Sophie as her only parent while we were more like a beloved aunt and uncle? Not at all. We accepted it as part of the family dynamic. Claire and I lived as husband and wife, but Sophie was always close by. Our journey to happiness had taken time, but I finally found my place again. Our life together was as close to perfect as any relationship could be. I loved Claire, Sophie, and our children. Claire loved me, Sophie, and the kids. Sophie loved Claire, needed me, and gave our children a mother's love. We never shared our lifestyle publicly. Only our closest friends knew the truth. But we lived a very happy life together, and that was all that mattered.